Good morning. Last summer I had a lot of hot days, and there's one day I remember in particular where I went out in the morning, early in the morning, went for the walk with the dog, with Nico. Came back and it was hot, it was humid already, it was just one of those really hot, humid mornings. Dived in the pool and cooled down and was refreshed, it was good. Got ready for the rest of the day, went out and did the day's work, and came back later in the afternoon, hot and bothered and tired and drained from the humidity and heat. And I thought, I just need to dive in the pool and cool down. I could remember the refreshing feeling of that cool water on the skin, and knew that it would restore me, invigorate me, refresh me. But one thing led to another. I got distracted, and there was some emails and things I forgot to do, and a phone call here, and in the end I just I can't be bothered. And I sat down, and there was a fan or air conditioning on. I suppose I cooled down, but I didn't get that deep refreshment that I remembered and recalled from the morning, and that could have been mine. I guess that for me, it's an image or a metaphor of many of us of life, that we stand on the threshold of something different that we can see before us, but we don't always take the opportunity to engage it, to do what we could do, to take the step. I remember having to arrange a funeral. It was a funeral for a guy called Arnold. And it was his son, whom I'd met a few times, didn't know well. And he, we were talking and arranging the funeral and sharing stories. Arnold's life, he was background. He was in the financial world and did work for different companies and senior kind of roles. But he used a lot of his time to help not-for-profits. And a lot of the church or agencies and organisations. He brought a lot of expertise, and he helped and gave a lot of his time, particularly in retirement, to these kinds of agencies and organisations. And he was heavily involved in his local church and did a lot of work for them, in support and help. And his son David, I don't think understood it. He kind of looked in and he could see his father and mother, who died a few years earlier, had a lovely house, but it was small and it was simple. They had some nice things in it, but their life was relatively simple. Give them their good music and some nice pieces of furniture that they had, and just some simple things. Whereas David, he was in the legal profession, and he was ambitious and trying to climb up, and so all of his time had to be spent on stuff that would fuel his career and occupation. He had a house, and he was forever, every time I saw him, ran into him, he was putting on another room or another story or a different extension, or renovating the bathroom or the kitchen, or doing something more. And every time he was filling the house with more paintings and art and rugs and furniture and antiques, and he was always updating his car, to the next model or the next big thing, something that would fit the image that he wanted to promote. He was always looking for the next promotion, and his life was geared around that stuff. And you could see in the conversations that there's something in his father's simplicity and the life he had of faith and spirit, that he saw the world differently. There's something intriguing to David in that, but he never quite got it. He kind of stood and looked in, but he never took the step. And I think that's a very real kind of experience for many of us in our world. I know I experienced something like that. We see in the possibilities of this other world, this other way of being that's grounded in spirit, in love, in hope, in peace, but we're distracted. We're distracted by the attachments of our lives, the bills that have to be paid, the job we have to do, the emails, the stuff that draws us in each day and takes our time. And we never quite take the steps we could to the full freedom and joy that we see in that other place, that other world. This week in churches across the world, there'll be a reading from John chapter 3, John's story of Jesus, and then chapter 3. It's a story of Nicodemus. And Nicodemus is a religious leader, a Pharisee, supposedly an enlightened one who can lead the people in the ways of God. And yet, in this story, Nicodemus comes to Jesus at night. Now, I've always thought that was him coming in secret. He just didn't want to be seen by other people. But really, it's about John's images of light and dark, day and night, seeing and blindness, are metaphors he uses. The light, Jesus is the light of the world who comes in to enlighten us in the ways of God, the ways of spirit. But he says the world prefers darkness and lives in darkness. And so day and night are part of this. And so are the seeing and blindness that will appear. Some people can see and some are blind. And so for John, this Nicodemus comes at night because that's where he lives. He lives in the darkness. Even though he's a man who should be enlightened, a man of the light, he prefers the darkness. And he comes on behalf of other religious leaders to see Jesus. We know that you are a great teacher and that God must be with you, or you wouldn't do the things you do, says Nicodemus. And Jesus says, Nicodemus, truly I say to you, unless a person is born again, or the phrase could be born again, born from above, born anew, they won't see the reign of God. They won't understand it or engage with it or experience it. And Nicodemus says, what do you mean born again? How can I as an adult be, re-enter my mother's womb and be born again? What are you talking about? And he says, unless you're born of water and the Spirit, what is born of the flesh is flesh, and what is born of the Spirit is spirit. Unless you're born of the Spirit, you don't enter into that deeper, richer life that God has for us. And you can see Nicodemus is confused in all this. He doesn't get it. And Jesus is puzzled. Why is this man, this leader of the people, this religious leader, how come he doesn't get it? What's that about? And Jesus is saying, look, there is this spiritual reality, this deeper reality that embraces us, that draws us all in which we're invited to be part. This reality of God, this reign of God, which is bigger than flesh and blood. It's bigger than the material things we see all around us. It's bigger than the career or power or wealth or greed or fame or fortune or control or power. It's bigger than all of those things. And it invites us into a deeper sense of being and living in God. It seems that John's Gospel, John's story, written about 6 decades after Jesus, was written in a context where there were people on the margins, the fringes of this community of faith, these people of God's people, followers of Jesus. And they could see and were drawn and attracted to what was there, to the sharing, to the love, to the life that these people were sharing. But they weren't taking that next step. They were standing there, but they were drawn back by the attachments of the world, of life, and didn't take the step into community. And this story is, in a sense, John's encouragement for people to take that step, that Jesus invites us to take the step, to experience, open ourselves, to allow ourselves to be embraced into the Spirit, to experience God and to be drawn into this bigger reality that is all around us. And some will and some won't. But we who hear this are invited into this journey in Jesus, with Christ. It's about drawing us beyond the typical responsibilities and attachments of our lives. All around us in the media, in the culture in which we live, there's preoccupation with education, which is very good, with job, which is important, with house and food and income and all those things. Then there's the priorities that people place on power and control and getting power and maintaining. Politicians vying for positions, even within their own parties, fighting each other, building the numbers, because power is seen as important and control. And it's almost this sense that if I get that next thing, that next step, that promotion, that extra room on the house, that bigger house, that new car, that, I don't know, extra $1 million, whatever it is, I'll be happy. And what we see in our own lives and in the lives of others is we get that thing and we are happy for a bit, but after a while it becomes ordinary and we realise happiness is not found in a new car. Happiness is not found in a higher level of education. All those things are good and can do things for us. Happiness is not about trips overseas or a bigger house or a bigger this or that or being more important or more powerful. We find contentment and meaning not in those things, but in relationships, in learning to see the world in a different way, of being open to spirit which reveals to us deeper realities. It's like the trees behind me and the trees around me, looking into them and seeing the beauty and the wonder. Or on the walk this morning I had with Nico down by the creek, the flow of the creek, in which there are ducks, there are eels, there are fish, sometimes there's lizards and black snakes and other reptiles and insects. There's also the birds. This morning there were a flock of cockatoos. Cockatoos just flew and they were spread out and they flew over. It's brilliant to watch them. And they were screeching at each other and calling out. And then there were some parakeets or lorikeets flew through and they zipped through and galahs were feeding. There's a magpie who sat and watched us. And the beautiful differences of trees and plants, these beautiful trees losing their leaves, going from green to gold to red, and just this beauty. The sky was clear and rich and blue. And sometimes, like yesterday, there were really streaky clouds, this beautiful array of clouds in the sky. And then this morning the sun filtering through the trees, and just seeing the light up the world. Or the other day, the mist on the creek. It's seeing in those things the presence of God. It's being with other people, sharing a meal, sharing stories of joy and pain of life, and knowing that God is in our midst, that there's something rich and special in this. Or sitting back and listening to some beautiful music and being taken into another place. The creativity and beauty of the composer and the musicians. It's hearing a story that's inspiring and wondrous. A story of love and compassion and justice and self-sacrifice and giving of another. It's an invitation into this other world of spirit, to let go of those things that are our attachments, that tie us down and constrain us, and giving ourselves into this way of God, this way of Christ, this way that Jesus invites us into, and discovering there the freedom of being this child of God who is beloved. It's a beautiful image. And in this story of Nicodemus, we're invited, like I was on that day in summer, to dive into the water, to find renewal and refreshment and life. That day I didn't. Another day I did. And I was glad I did. Are you and I willing to walk this walk with Jesus into this new way of being, into this liberated experience of life in God? Amen. you.